My name is Priya. I am 52 years old. And the text message I received 3 hours ago said, Mom, we're selling the clinic. Papers are signed. You'll get your share, don't worry. Don't worry? As if 28 years of my life could be reduced to a casual dismissal sent between someone's morning coffee and lunch meeting. I stared at my phone in the halal butcher shop where I was buying meat for tonight's dinner, feeling the ground shift beneath my feet. My daughter Zara and my son Imran had just sold the medical clinic my late husband and I had built from nothing. The clinic where I had worked as the office manager, translator, and unofficial community liaison for nearly 3 decades. The clinic that served the Bengali, Somali, and Pakistani families in East London who had nowhere else to go. They sold it without telling me, without asking me, without even the courtesy of a phone call. I am a British Bangladeshi woman who came to London at 23 with a nursing degree no one would recognize and English so broken I couldn't order tea without fumbling. My husband Kareem was a doctor who drove minicabs for 2 years because the NHS wouldn't accept his credentials from Dhaka. We cleaned offices at night, studied during the day, and saved every pence until we could open a small clinic in Tower Hamlets. For 28 years, I was the invisible engine of that clinic. I translated medical histories for elderly aunties who spoke only Sylheti. I negotiated with pharmaceutical suppliers. I held the hands of teenage girls who couldn't tell their parents they needed contraception. I scheduled appointments, managed billing, trained staff, and kept everything running while Kareem saw patients. When Kareem died of a heart attack 4 years ago, I thought I would drown in grief. But our children had just finished medical school. Zara became a GP. Imran specialized in pediatrics. They stepped into the clinic, and I told myself this was the legacy we had built. A family business. A service to our community. Something meaningful. I was so proud. How foolish I was. But what my children don't know is that tonight, when I opened the sealed envelope their father left with our family solicitor before he died, the envelope marked, to be given to Priya only if the children betray the clinic's mission, everything is going to change. Kareem died on a Tuesday morning while making rounds at the clinic. One moment he was checking an infant's heartbeat, the next he collapsed. Massive coronary. The paramedics said he was gone before he hit the floor. He was 53 years old. For 4 years, I have mourned him. But I also believed that our children would honor his memory by continuing the work we started. The clinic wasn't just a business. It was a contribution to the community that had embraced us when we arrived with nothing. After Kareem's death, Zara and Imran took over the medical side while I continued managing operations. But slowly, things began to change. Zara started complaining that we charged too little. Mum, we can't survive on NHS rates alone. We need to see private patients. Imran stopped coming to the Friday community health talks we held for elderly patients. I don't have time for charity work. I have a family now. They hired a new practice manager, a slick young man named Marcus who knew nothing about our community but talked constantly about optimizing revenue streams and market positioning. They stopped asking for my input. When I questioned their decisions, Zara would smile that tight smile and say, Mum, you don't understand modern healthcare business. 3 months ago, they moved me to a smaller office in the back. 2 months ago, they stopped including me in staff meetings. Last month, Marcus suggested I might enjoy retirement. And this morning, that text message. I drove home in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The clinic was my identity. Without it, who was I? Just an aging immigrant woman with no formal qualifications, no pension of my own, no purpose. When I reached our terraced house in Whitechapel, the house Kareem and I had bought 20 years ago, after a decade of renting, I saw a courier van parked outside. A young woman approached me with a clipboard. Mrs. Kareem Ahmed. I nodded. I have a delivery from Fawcett and Partner Solicitors. I need you to sign. She handed me a large envelope, official and heavy. The return address was indeed a family solicitor, the one who had handled Kareem's will 4 years ago. Inside my kitchen, with the afternoon call to prayer echoing from the mosque down the street, I opened the envelope. There was a letter in Kareem's handwriting, that distinctive script I knew from love notes hidden in my lunch bag and prescriptions written for patients. My dearest Priya, it began. If you are reading this, it means Mr. Fawcett has determined that our children have betrayed the clinic's mission. It means they have chosen profit over community, status over service. It breaks my heart to be right about this possibility, but I knew my death might change them in ways we couldn't predict. You don't know this, but for the last 5 years of my life, I had a secret. I was terrified of dying young like my father did, leaving you vulnerable. So I made arrangements you knew nothing about. I created a separate practice, a telemedicine consultation service for British expats living abroad. I did it late at night after clinic hours, consulting with patients in Dubai, Singapore, Hong Kong. People paid in pounds and euros directly to an offshore account. In 5 years, I saved £2.8 million. That money was never reported to the clinic's books. It was never part of my estate. It was kept in a trust that activates only under specific conditions that Mr. Fawcett has apparently confirmed have been met. That £2.8 million is now entirely yours, my love. But that's not all. The clinic building, the actual property, was never owned by the clinic itself. I purchased it separately through a holding company in your name. The children think they sold a thriving practice. What they actually sold was the patient list, equipment, and goodwill. The building still belongs to you. Their buyer has no lease, no legal right to operate from that location. By law, you can evict them with 90 days notice. I'm also leaving you documentation of something I discovered in my final year. Zara has been referring wealthy patients to a private clinic she opened with her husband in Canary Wharf, siphoning the profitable cases away from our community clinic. Imran has been billing the NHS for procedures he never performed, pocketing the difference. Mr. Fawcett has copies of everything. Use this information wisely, my love. You have always been the moral center of our family. I trust you to do what is right. With eternal love, Kareem. The letter slipped from my fingers and fluttered to the kitchen table. £2.8 million. The building. Evidence of fraud. I sat there as the afternoon light faded, trying to process what I'd just learned. Kareem had protected me. Even from beyond the grave, he had seen what I was too blind to see, that our children might betray everything we'd built. But why hadn't he told me while he was alive? Why the secrecy? I read the letter again, searching for clues. Then I saw the date at the top. It had been written 6 months before his death, when he'd gone for what he told me was a routine checkup but was actually a full cardiac workup. He'd known his heart was failing. He'd known he might not have much time. And he'd spent that time protecting me. The phone rang. It was Zara. Mum, I know you're upset about the text. We should have told you in person. Can we come by tomorrow to explain? Her voice was smooth, practiced. The voice she used with difficult patience. Yes, I said quietly. Come for lunch. 1 o'clock. After I hung up, I called the solicitor's number on the envelope. A secretary put me through to Mr. Fawcett. Mrs. Ahmed, I've been expecting your call. I imagine you have questions. Why now? I asked. Why did you wait until today? Your husband's instructions were very specific. I was to monitor the clinic's operations after his death. If within 4 years the children sold the practice to a for-profit entity without consulting you, or if they attempted to remove you from your position, I was to release this envelope. This morning, the sale was registered with Companies House. The trigger condition was met. What do I do now? That, Mrs. Ahmed, is entirely up to you. But I should mention that your husband also left instructions for me to assist you with whatever action you choose to take. My services are prepaid for the next 5 years. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the bed I'd shared with Kareem for 29 years, staring at the ceiling, feeling a mixture of grief, rage, and something I hadn't felt in years, power. My children had dismissed me. They treated me like an outdated piece of furniture to be moved out of sight. They'd sold my life's work without a second thought. But they'd forgotten who raised them. They'd forgotten who taught them that everything worth having must be earned through honesty and hard work. It was time to remind them. The next morning, I woke early and made a full Bengali lunch. Chicken rejala, dal, pillau rice, bigan bhaja. The smells filled the house, the same smells that had welcomed my children home from school every day of their childhood. Zara arrived first, dressed in expensive designer clothes I knew she couldn't afford on an NHS salary. Imran came with his wife Nadia, who barely greeted me before checking her phone. We sat at the dining table, the same table where we'd eaten thousands of meals as a family. Mum, Zara began, we know you're hurt. But you have to understand the offer was too good to refuse. A private healthcare group offered us £800,000. That split 3 ways, £266,000 each. 3 ways. I asked quietly. Well, yes. You, me, and Imran. Fair shares. Fair, I repeated. After 28 years of my life, after building that clinic from nothing with your father, fair is 1/3 of £800,000. Imran shifted uncomfortably. Mum, we're the doctors. We're the ones with the degrees and the licenses. That's what has value in a sale. I see, I said. And the building? They exchanged glances. What about it? Zara asked. The building where the clinic operates. Did you include that in the sale? Of course, Imran said. That's part of what made it valuable. I took a document from the folder beside my plate and slid it across the table. This is the title deed to 47 Whitechapel Road. The clinic building. Notice the owner's name. Zara picked it up, her face going pale. Priya Begum Ahmed. This can't be right. It's quite right. Your father purchased the building separately in 2008 and transferred it to my name. The clinic has been operating as my tenant. You sold a practice that has no legal right to occupy the building it operates from. The silence was deafening. That's impossible, Imran stammered. Dad would have told us. Why would he? It was my property. What did you think happened to the money from selling our old flat in Bethnal Green? We told you it went to pay down clinic debts. It didn't. It bought this building. Nadia looked furious. This is some kind of trick. No trick. Just facts. Facts you would have known if you'd bothered to do proper due diligence. But you were in such a hurry to cash out, you didn't check. Zara's voice hardened. Fine. So you own the building. We'll just factor that into the negotiations with the buyer. You can sell them a lease. I don't think so, I said. I pulled out another document. This is an eviction notice. The buyer has 90 days to vacate. Mum, you can't do this. Imran shouted. We signed contracts. There will be legal consequences. For you, perhaps. The buyer will sue you for misrepresentation. You sold them a clinic they can't legally operate. That's called fraud. Zara stood up, her chest scraping loudly. Why are you doing this? Why? I felt 28 years of invisible labor rising in my throat. Why am I doing this? You sold my life's work over a text message. You pushed me out of the clinic like I was nothing. You treated me like an ignorant old woman who didn't understand modern healthcare business. We were trying to protect you from stress. Zara protested. Protect me? Or remove me so I wouldn't interfere with your plans. I pulled out the third set of documents. These are copies of patient referral records showing that Zara has been diverting profitable private patients to her Canary Wharf clinic for the past 18 months. These are NHS billing records showing that Imran has claimed payment for 23 procedures that were never performed. Imran's face went ashen. Where did you get those? Your father kept meticulous records. He knew what you were doing. He documented everything before he died. You're lying, Zara whispered. Mr. Fawcett at Fawcett and Partners has the originals, along with statutory declarations from 3 staff members who were willing to testify about your fraudulent billing practices. Nadia stood up. We're leaving. Come on, Imran. Sit down, I said, and something in my voice made them all freeze. You will sit down and you will listen to what I have to say. Because what happens next depends entirely on the choices you make in the next 10 minutes. Slowly, they sunk back into their chairs. Your father left me £2.8 million in a trust you knew nothing about. Combined with the building value, I have nearly £4 million in assets. More than enough to open a new clinic. More than enough to hire competent, caring doctors who remember why they went to medical school. I looked at each of them in turn. You thought you were so clever, selling the clinic behind my back. You thought I was powerless. You thought I was just the immigrant mother who answered phones and smiled at patients. My voice cracked. I translated your father's words when he saved lives. I held the hands of mothers when their children were diagnosed with terrible illnesses. I was the one people came to when they couldn't afford their medications, and I found ways to help them. I built relationships with every pharmacy, every specialist, every community leader in East London. The clinic wasn't valuable because of the equipment or the patient database. It was valuable because of the trust our community placed in us. Trust I built over 3 decades. Zara was crying now. Mum, we didn't mean. Don't insult me with more lies. Here's what's going to happen. You have two choices. I laid both hands flat on the table. Choice 1. You fight me. The buyer sues you for fraud. I report your NHS billing fraud to the General Medical Council. You both lose your medical licenses. Your reputations are destroyed. You spend the next decade in legal hell. Choice 2. You accept my terms. What terms? Imran asked hoarsely. You will return every pound you earn from your fraudulent activities to the NHS. You will work with me to make the sale contract null and void. I don't care how much it costs in legal fees. You will resign from any private practices you've opened. I paused. And you will work at the new clinic I'm going to open. Same location, same mission. But this time, I'll be the owner and director. You'll be salaried employees. You'll see the patients who need care, not the ones who can pay the most. You'll do it for a fair NHS salary, nothing more. That's slavery. Nadia burst out. That's accountability. You'll do this for 5 years. At the end of that time, if you've proven you remembered why you became doctors, we'll discuss partnership. Real partnership. And if we refuse? Zara asked. Then I hope you've saved enough money for good lawyers. And I hope your children never find out their parents went to prison for fraud. The room was silent except for the ticking of the wall clock Karim had brought back from a medical conference in Geneva. Imran spoke first. I don't know what to say. Say yes or no. Those are your only words right now. He looked at Nadia, who was furious but clearly calculating the consequences. Then he looked back at me. Yes. Zara took longer. She stared at me as if seeing me for the first time in her life. I'm sorry, Mum. I really am sorry. We got lost. I got lost. Sorry is a start. But sorry needs action behind it. Yes, she whispered. I accept your terms. I pulled out contracts I'd had Mr. Fawcett prepare. 5-year employment agreements, repayment schedules, ethical conduct clauses. Sign these. We start unwinding the sale tomorrow. As they signed, their hands shaking, I felt no triumph. Only sadness that it had come to this. After they left, I sat alone in the kitchen where I'd read Karim's letter just 24 hours earlier. You knew, I whispered to the empty room. You knew they would lose their way. But he'd also known I was strong enough to bring them back. The following months were brutal. The sale unwinding was complicated and expensive. The buyer threatened legal action but eventually settled when confronted with a title deed issue. Zara and Imran had to use their share of the aborted sale to pay legal fees and begin repaying the NHS. I reopened the clinic under a new name, Ahmed Community Health Center. I hired 2 young doctors fresh out of medical school, a Somali woman and a Pakistani man who were hungry to serve their communities. Zara and Imran worked harder than they'd ever worked. No private practice to retreat to. No shortcuts. Just patient after patient who needed care. One evening, 6 months after everything had changed, Zara found me in my office reviewing supply orders. Mum, can we talk? I gestured to the chair across from my desk, in my clinic. I need you to know something, she said. When Dad died, I was terrified. Terrified of failing, of not being good enough, of not being him. So I chased money instead, thinking that success meant wealth. But watching you these past months, seeing how you've rebuilt this place, how patients come here specifically because they trust you, I finally understand what Dad was trying to teach us. She paused. You're the best doctor this clinic has ever had, and you never saw a single patient. I felt tears prick my eyes. Your father was the brilliant physician. I was just. You were the heart, she interrupted. Medicine without heart is just biology. You taught us that medicine is about community, about service, about seeing people's humanity. We forgot. But I won't forget again. Over the next 4 years, something remarkable happened. The clinic thrived. We served more patients than ever. Zara started a mental health program for young South Asian women. Imran created a pediatric outreach program for refugee families. They became the doctors their father had dreamed they would be. On what would have been Karim's 60th birthday, we held a memorial ceremony at the clinic. Community members came to share stories of how he'd helped them. But many also shared stories about me, about the time I'd advocated for a patient with immigration services, or negotiated reduced medication costs, or simply sat with someone who was frightened and alone. I realized I'd never been invisible. I've been essential. At 56 now, I'm running the most successful community clinic in East London. I've trained a new generation of healthcare workers who understand that medicine is both science and compassion. I've used part of Kareem's legacy to create a scholarship fund for children of immigrants who want to study healthcare. And my relationship with my children has transformed. They no longer see me as the mother who needs protection or management. They see me as their colleague, their mentor, their partner in the work we all care about. We have family dinners every Friday, and we don't talk about money or success. We talk about the patients whose lives we've changed, the community we've served, the legacy we're building together. The sealed envelope Kareem left me sits framed on my office wall now, a reminder of his love and foresight. But it's also a reminder of my own strength I always had but never claimed. I'm not the woman I was 4 years ago. That woman would have accepted her children's dismissal, taken her £266,000, and faded into quiet retirement. This woman built something bigger than she ever imagined possible. To anyone listening to this story, I want you to know, your worth is not determined by whether others recognize it. Your contributions don't disappear just because they go unacknowledged. Sometimes the greatest power isn't in being seen. It's in knowing what you're capable of when everyone underestimates you. And it's never too late to remind the world and yourself exactly who you are. If you've ever built something quietly while others took the credit, this story is for you. Tell me where you're listening from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories.